Welcome, Ms. Howard and Mr. Swalling. You're here today to present your findings regarding Forvik, the alleged sovereign microstate in the Shetlands. Ms. Mora and I, Van Lahainen, will be questioning you on behalf of the Scottish Government. This session will be recorded.
Hi, so could you start maybe by telling us a bit about why Mr. Hill has claimed sovereignty of this island?
Mr. Hill became passionate about Udall law and Shetland's potential sovereignty, so he claimed Forvik as sovereign on 21st of June 2008. Forvik is a legal experiment to see if the goal of a sovereign Shetland is attainable and to highlight any potential legal difficulties whilst gaining sovereignty.
And what are the main arguments that Mr. Hill is putting forward, whether legal, historical, cultural, or otherwise?
So Mr. Hill's main argument is a historical one. He's claiming the Scottish ownership of Shetland is illegal. The transfer of ownership from King Christian to King James III in 1471 only composed of Christian's personal territories, according to Mr. Hill, not the territory owned by the inhabitants, which was owned under Udall law, which gave them allodial rights over their lands.
And how did Mr. Hill acquire this highland, and is there any disputes about his ownership?
It's understood that Mr. Hill gained rights over this island from Mr. King, which was done by the means of signing a document in front of two independent witnesses. However, if it was done under good faith or not is misleading, as Mr. King never said about any mental illnesses and later stated that when it was signed, he was having a bipolar high. There have also been many payment struggles throughout the time after which Mr. Hill signed this document, but has asserted that the island wasn't his until he'd finished paying for it.
And should this territory be respected in the same way as the Eddie Mabel's case in Australia? Is there any historical precedent?
Well, the Scottish adoption of Shetland was by and large a peaceful one, and while Shetland has a strong regional identity, they do not meet requirements to be counted as an Indigenous group. For example, they don't really have a long history of discrimination. The unfair exploitation that characterized Mater Nullius is therefore not applicable in this case. The territory of Shetland was established by Denmark, Norway, and Scotland, and the transition was peaceful. Mr. Hill is, however, arguing for a wider application of Indigenous laws, which might have some precedent.
And do you think that these Udall laws support this type of sovereign state creation, as Mr. Hill claims?
Udall law is an oral tradition. Because of this, any legal claims have to have a reasonable custom. There must be a local consensus that the application of Udall law has historical precedence, but most Udall scholars disagree with this application of the Udall law.
And are there any monetary motivations behind this campaign?
Well, Mr. Hill has published a book and is selling citizenship to Forvik, so there are some forms of income. He claims this is to cover legal costs. Recently, Mr. Hill has been tried for not disclosing his expenses for the recent general election campaign, which might warrant further investigation into this question.
And why has Mr. Hill invited oil companies to explore the surrounding waters?
Mr. Hill has invited a range of oil companies to bid for exploration rights in the islet's territorial waters. When Mr. Hill applied for the seabed, he was rejected some of the area, however still quoted, "Even so, the piece of the seabed I'm claiming is certainly large enough to put an oil rig on." If Shetland was to become sovereign, there will be a larger economic freedom and the abilities to negotiate individually with corporations as an allodial island, which this invitation is demonstrating.
And what environmental and economic consequences could this movement have on Forvik and Shetlands?
There are, of course, issues with the exclusive economic zones. If the Forvik experiment succeeds, then fishing grounds would have to be renegotiated in Shetlands. And if Shetland then becomes independent, disputes regarding the rights to the nearby oil reservoirs would no doubt surface. This is, of course, emitting the fears surrounding how Mr. Hill could possibly be endangering the otters on Forvik, which is a site of special scientific interest, after all.
Yeah, so obviously this would also have an impact on the local flora and fauna. Well, Ms. Otward and Mr. Swalling, thank you very much for all your answers and for your time. That concludes our meeting about this study case. Thank you.
Thank you very much.